most of the time when we're in the world, we're often looking at it as something outside of ourselves. And this is normal and natural. And yet there's exciting neuroscience that corroborates ancient yoga teachings that there is no separation from us or what we think of as ourselves and the outside world. And this is most apparent in our relationships. And Dr. Dan Siegel, who's a neuroscientist, has eloquently explained that our nervous system actually emerges from skin cells. So when you think about your interaction with the outside world, the thing that is in between, so to speak, is our skin. And it's really easy for us to identify as our skin, and that we make all sorts of assumptions about ourselves or about other people based on appearances or based on the notion that they are somehow other. And this is a valuable and useful distinction for us to be able to determine what is real or how to distinguish our taking care of, say, our own personal needs. And at the same time, there's the way to see it all as your connection to it, and eventually it is all you and everything is one. That's like a much greater sort of transcendent experience, and the notion of that is often challenging to even conceptualize, but nonetheless it's real. And so the simple way to kind of ground it back into yourself is to recognize that we have an inner world and we have an inter world, that the world outside of us, rather than thinking of it as other, it's much more appropriate to think of it as a mirror, and that we are experiencing reality, or it's being presented to us in a way that is mirroring our own inner neurologic state, or the state of our nervous system. And in understanding that the other often gets labeled as either in or out, essentially. Like, we have people that we like or people that we don't like, or we have experiences or places in the world that we like and places that we don't like. And this is kind of a central thing to spiritual practice, is to let go of our attachments to those things, but not really trying to let go of the attachments to them either, because if you try to let go of them, it's just going to make it harder. So it's more about focusing on the presence of love within you, and then naturally any prejudices or things like that will start to fall away. And this is sort of the crux of it, is that there's a very practical purpose for recognizing our interconnection and even our interdependence on the world at large. That one, having the notion of a separate self puts us in a highly competitive mind state that leads to people only focusing on being the best and the brightest without necessarily taking into account lighting the lights of others and bringing everybody to that state of being their best and their brightest. So the intense sort of individualism that can be very healthy, in the sense of you must develop a separate self, you must develop your sort of you must individualize and awaken your connection to yourself. And at the same time, through doing that, remembering to light others' candles along the way, that it is a win-win, and that cooperation over the long scale of time always beats competition. And not to say that there's not healthy competition either, because it is important to be your best, and if nothing else, to compete with yourself, and to support others in their own competitive nature as well. So as we understand that this sort of notion of a separate self is an illusion, and at the same time there's kind of two different selves that we're talking about. There's the little self, which is, I guess, more ego, and then the big self, which is recognizing that you are connected to the totality and you contain the totality within you, and therefore everyone and everything in the world is therefore directly connected to you. And when we interface with the world, we're really interfacing with an extension of ourselves, essentially, is one way of feeling about it. And this means, well, in the long evolutionary scale of time, once again, we have a lot of genetic predispositions towards certain behaviors that we have evolved in survival modes for millions of years, like even before we were Homo sapiens, like monkey or primate, our past primate selves, like, had predispositions. We were discerning our members of our community and wanting to relate to ourselves through the other. And so our sense of self in many ways emerged from relating to other members of our immediate tribe, you might say, or group of primal ancestors, whether they were primates or whatever. And when we connect to that space of, we were deeply connected to nature, and also nature is really intense, and so we needed to be able to trust each other beyond the context or confines of language. And in a very intense way, there was either the you're in or you're out kind of mentality. And when I say mentality, it's almost before, human beings were even cognizing thoughts. Like, this is something that's hardwired into the brain, so to speak. And now that we are conscious of this, and we have significantly less strain on our survival mechanisms, and we're able to think about things critically significantly more, and generally life is way better for people on Earth now than it has ever been, despite humans, ecological blunders or otherwise. We're still in a space of the highest material efficiency, as well as just spiritual and intellectual unfolding. And so being aware of our evolutionary past beyond even our human nature and into the deep history, we understand how some of these behaviors that we see in the world, like neo-tribalism or even, political extremism or anything like that, racism, like the elitism, any sort of thing that is deeply ingrained, and yet it's something that we can transcend, and that through understanding neuroscience, and neuroscience understanding the benefits of meditation, there are regions of the brain that are essentially designated towards integration and towards building greater bridges and greater connections within the interworld, is how we then understand how we are bridging ourselves with the external world. And of course, getting out of that fight or flight, the parasympathetic or sympathetic activation of the autonomic nervous system and the vagus response, and how that's connected to our early survival mechanisms of essentially just feeling safe and being able to transcend our biology in a very sort of mundane or seamless way, where we're not plugging into neuro, whatever you want to call it, feedback devices. I mean, you can do that, but it's mostly just about understanding how to rewire your brain with what you've already got, and that's plenty of work for most of us. And I'm not going to get into like the augmented brain stuff right now, because I feel like that's just another level of this whole thing, and that being able to tune into everyone as we are, that we're all different, and it's important to recognize our differences. And that's what makes us special as human beings, is we have this massive amount of variety within our species to be able to go out and master different things, and that we all have that within us, and that our experience of life is unique to us as our own, and at the same time it's shared, and that we all make it richer by bringing together the gifts that we have and being able to share at the grand campfire of everybody around the world, being able to see you or hear your ideas, or you can do anything. You can't do everything, but if you set your mind to something, you can do anything. So this state of transcending boundaries of limited thinking is essentially what this is about. And through various meditation practices, I'm not going to go into which ones right now, because then it's just a matter of, I mean, you know, you could even say it's not necessarily about meditation, because even that's a box, you know, and so it's mostly just recognizing what already is here. And you have a nervous system, and you have a heart, and there's other people in the world that are also exactly like you in that regard, and that we are all working on the same thing together, which is being alive, living life, thriving, finding meaning, etc. And that when I do say meditation, it's like, in simplest terms, stillness, and cultivating stillness, and whatever happens within you through that process, and the experience of the heart, and life often throwing dirt on the heart, or those sorts of experiences, and how to clean the heart, let the heart be open and stay open, and knowing how to protect that at the same time. That's a practice, and that when we understand that connection, and the way we build the tone of our nervous system, when we build our ability to connect and resonate with others without taking on their stuff, where we can still know that compassion involves mirroring, but it's not the perfect mirroring in the way that you're just resonating a generating field of love without necessarily bringing someone else's energy into your field, so to speak, or you are able to process that energy in a way that you can be of service to the other person. And this is like a deeply human process, and perhaps people think of it as, in some circles, like a spiritual thing, and it's just what everybody is doing all the time. And again, back to Dr. Dan Siegel, he was reflecting on just the suicide prevention hotline, what it was like to be supporting other people that were in crisis, and that this is not something that is for everyone, but this notion of how to be supportive without taking on someone else's energy, and really having to be present for them completely and fully, because there is critical life on the line. And knowing that there's this fine line between mirroring and resonating, and that when we attune to what that is, and when we experience that love within ourselves, or that state of deep understanding, that this is where this is where the real life happens. And that's just an example of, if you really want to just be in the present moment and be of service, there are a lot of people that need this sort of thing. And it doesn't have to be about crisis. It can just be helping an old lady across the street or teaching a kid to read or whatever it is. But there's this state of seeing the world go from being other to being being interconnected to that. And when we start to experience that, our notions of who's in and who's out, or this is this way and this is that way, we can start to see how there perhaps will always be that level of consciousness within ourselves, and that it's a useful thing for us. And at the same time, when we can go beyond it, when we can see that, okay, I may have, perhaps at some point, maybe I saw this person as another, and now I see them as, one of my own. And the more that we experience that awakening of the heart and that connecting to all beings as one big family, then we are that much closer to living on a peaceful, happy planet. And this is what everybody wants. So that's why it's valuable for all of us. And when we see that there are common goals that we can really root in and get to the heart of whatever it is that we are as humans, then we'll be able to support each other and bring that light and goodwill to humanity. So thank you for watching, and give someone a hug. Namaste. Peace.